Hi, parents. Welcome. Today we have a kind of unique topic. It's unique here, as in this is the first time that we are talking about narcissistic personality disorder. So welcome, and we have with us an expert in this field. Her name is Wendy Behary. Um, I,
Very. Mhm.
I apologize. I'm so bad with this,
No
but
problem.
yeah. So she's the founder and the director of the Cognitive Therapy Center in New Jersey, and she has this amazing book. It's called Disarming the Narcissist, right? And it has helped so many people out there. And I felt like it's such an important topic for alienated parents to be aware about, because really, when you look at what the alienators are doing, and a lot of the alienators are actually diagnosed with NPD. So this is a kind of, and even when they are not diagnosed, a lot of the behavior uh, that we're gonna be talking about, that you're gonna recognize. So understanding this is very important, as well as how do we deal with these alienators? How do we deal with their behavior? So Wendy, thank you so much for being here. And would you mind introduce to us sort of the basic of what, and before we go deep into it, what is narcissism is?
Sure. Yes. And let me apologize if you're hearing a background noise because, of course, it's always typical. As soon as the interview starts, the big truck pulls up outside my window. So I apologize if you're hearing a noise in the background. But thank you, Petra, for having me. I'm happy to be with you on this really important topic. And I'll start by saying that um, narcissism is not a brand new word anymore. Once upon a time, it was pretty limited to the world of clinicians, psychotherapists, and mental health professionals. And now it's become more widely understood by the general public, which is a good thing, because I think finally there's a way for people to recognize and put some kind of a name on this experience that they're having, which can be very liberating for those who are suffering in relationships with people who have issues of narcissism. When I wrote my first edition of my book, which was many years ago, there wasn't much, in the general audience section of the library on narcissism. And now there's probably 10 times, 100 times, maybe even the amount of writing on that topic. And so I'm pleased about that. I guess there's so much to say. And so I'll see if I can be really keep this very specifically tailored to your interest today. It's not surprising that you would find among the alienators out there those that have narcissistic traits. We think about narcissism as a type of syndrome or pathology that happens along a spectrum from very mild to severe, with normal healthy elements of narcissism, believe it or not, built in there too. But I think at the severe end of the spectrum, you have someone who is highly self-absorbed and feels very entitled to have what they want when they want it, and to make the rules and break the rules, basically, to control, to dominate, to manipulate the world in ways not necessarily to create pain, but to protect their own ego and to have what they want. And when that, well, let me back up. Underneath all of that bluster that you will see, the arrogance and the self aggrandizing and the grandiosity and the superiority and the demeaning, devaluing behaviors, the betrayal trauma that they can promote on their partners. But underneath that, what you often find is someone with great insecurities. And the reason that's important to know is because, and many of you know this who are dealing with narcissistic people or partners in your life, that it's not hard to trigger that anger, that vengeance, that retaliative response from them, because they are so sensitive to feeling like the bad guy, to feeling wrong, to feeling cheated, to feeling controlled, to feeling manipulated by you. And so they will do whatever it takes to restore their ego, if you will, to restore that supply of specialness and extraordinariness. They will do whatever that takes. And in some cases, the children become the collateral damage. And that's where your topic comes into play. At the severe end, I mean, you'll have everything from mild bad mouthing of mom or dad to, more severe, really creating this kind of toxic, mythical, deceitful storytelling that can drive children into states of confusion and depression and anxiety when it comes to how to relate to that parent and how to hold on to the very tentative attachment they may have to the narcissist. So
Thank you.
yeah, I'll let you go ahead.
No, I think that's amazing, and that's such a great introduction into this. And I just wanted to say thank you, Nevin and Jay, for sharing this. Parents, if you could please share this, like this video, so that it's sort of Facebook has its algorithm, right? So if you can help, so that way we can spread this out for more parents to be aware. And I wanted to say thank you, Pamela. Hi, Morgan. Yeah, I think, and then Niti, thank you so much for being here, and Craig. Craig just said that you describing my life. Yeah, if you guys have questions, please post it so that we can try to pick as many questions as possible. But you just address like a lot of things that I want to kind of, if we could dig into a lot of those. One of the things I thought was interesting was that you said that underneath this, Pamela, yeah, go ahead and post your question in the chat, and then we'll try to pick it up along the way. Yeah, but yeah, so underneath this sort of like superior outlook, like they're very good at this facade, right? They create this facade that people really look up to them and think that they are incredible people, right? And then, but inside you said they are insecure and they're doing this thing. Um, when you're doing something that sort of hurt, that create that injury to their ego, they will do things to attack you. And so my impression from what you said is that they're not doing it intentionally, or that they're not aware that it's causing harm to you, or what were you saying?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about narcissism, not sociopaths or psychopaths, that's very different. So we want to be clear that if we're talking about a narcissist, we're talking about someone who can do great harm. They can be very hurtful. They can betray. They will punish. But the goal for the narcissist isn't so much about getting pleasure out of creating pain for you. It's about preserving, protecting, and building their own sense of specialness. So it, again, it's not to make us feel any less upset or hurt or angry with this outcome, because the outcome is what it is. As one of my colleagues likes to say, if someone hits you in the head with a bat on purpose or by accident, it still hurts. So it hurts, but the intention isn't necessarily to harm. It's to prove a point. It's to, I'll show you. It's, you're going to pay because you hurt me, and that's what's fair. So they're always about this thing called justice, even though in fact children aren't necessarily treated in the most just ways when it comes to this retaliative power control game that happens.
Right. And in the chat room, Kyra said it's ego protection. So I think,
Yes.
like, yeah. Um, Carol, you can't hear. Like, is everyone else having problem with audio too? Can you guys let us know? And then Claudia said, as their action to shield their insecurities. I think that's what you're saying, right, Wendy? Yeah. And
Yeah.
Molly, thank you so much for sharing this. Okay, so I do they. It seemed to us that these alienators, when they tell these stories that are completely outrageously false, it seemed that they actually believe in their story. Do they believe in their story? Do they, or they know that this is wrong, but they're still doing it anyway?
Yeah, this is a really important question, and it's a hard question to answer because we have to think about the human being as being composed of many different states of mind. So I think if you think about a narcissist in a certain state of mind, they have different, I talk about this in my book, they wear different masks at different times. When they're behind the mask, where they are trying to compete, to win, to prove a point, to have their way, when they're overcompensating, meaning they're really in the fight to win, they have to believe themselves. but they are very smart people. Narcissists do tend to be incredibly successful, incredibly bright, incredibly capable. So they're not stupid. At some level, they know that what they are putting out there, what they are proposing to their child is not true, but they'll find ways in their mind to justify it. They'll find ways in their mind to make it seem sensible, just so that they can deliver the goods. And again, it's always about the winning. So in that moment, in that state of mind, they are convincing themselves that they are right, or they have the right to present it this way.
So let's talk about different type, right? Because you talk about there's a spectrum of it. Could you talk about, what are some of the types of NPD, and how do we diagnose, or how do we even notice it?
Yeah. Well, there's about three. I think the most recent research sort of narrows it down to about three types. But the most important types for us to think about are, there's the covert type of narcissist, the narcissist. Some of you will identify with this type of narcissist, who we call the vulnerable type, meaning that they tend to live a lot in the victim mode. They're always the victim. Their pain is bigger than anyone else's. Their suffering is greater than anyone else's. They have to put up with so much more than everyone else. Everything about their victimization is extraordinary and superior. That's a type, right? And they can be passive aggressive, not necessarily aggressive types. They'll sort of come at you from behind. They'll make a promise and not keep it. They'll say things to sort of appease you, but then they'll act in a totally different way. They'll harbor resentments and then maybe explode without expectation. And then you have the more typical aggressive or overt types of narcissists, the more arrogant, the show-offs. They can be charming, they can be heroic, they can be the superheroes at times. They can also be incredibly obnoxious and domineering and devaluing and critical and abusive. I mean, if you go all the way into the more severe end of the spectrum, you find aggression and abuse, including high volatility and even physical abuse in some cases.
So how is it that we, obviously for the situation with alienated parents, we fell in love with these personalities in the first place, right? And not just us. I think the rest of the world see, like, how is it that they are able to cover up this thing that we don't even realize that how toxic they are?
Yeah, that's another great question, Petra. And it's, you know, as I said before, if we think about ourselves as humans who have many parts to our personalities, that we're not one dimensional. I think narcissists can have parts of them under certain conditions that can be even genuinely very caring and very giving and very loving. So anyone can be captivated by their magic, if you will. Sometimes that's the charm, it's the allure, they know how to court. They know how to court. They know how to get what they want. If you're the prize, they're going to win it. And they know what to say, they know how to behave, they know what to do for a period of time anyway, until they get triggered, and then you see the other colors in the personality. It doesn't mean that none of it is genuine. It just means that they're really good when it comes to getting what they want, fulfilling the conquest. The problem is that they're not good at enduring, maintaining, sustaining intimacy, really being present and intimate. And that's something that we do tend to miss in the early phases of a relationship. And if you're not in an intimate relationship with them, it's really easy to be entertained because they can be funny, they're great storytellers, they're smart, they're interesting, they're good technicians, if you will. They make good doctors and surgeons and lawyers and accountants and plumbers. They can be in all walks of life, but they're usually at the top of their class. And part of that is because of their driven nature to not need anyone. I mean, they'll make demands of everyone, but they don't want to need anyone. And it's a big part of just how they have been cultivated to survive in the world. So again, I'm not feeling sorry for them. I mean, when I work with pretty severely narcissistic men, mostly in therapy, although I've treated women too. And for the most part, they have very wounded souls at the core. You know, they have upbringings that help us to make sense out of how they developed these narcissistic modes. And so, and I'm sure many of you have seen or you understand these parts of the narcissist you're dealing with. And the more you understand, the more you free yourself from self blame. I mean, the worst trap we can fall into when you're dealing with a narcissist is that you end up doubting yourself, questioning yourself, blaming yourself, believing you could fix this or change them. And that, you know, leads to fatigue and exhaustion and great pain.
So you mentioned about the childhood trauma, like that caused them lead to where they are today. How much of that is true trauma that caused that happened to them, or how much of it is to do with their own victimization, for example?
To do with their victimization?
Yeah, because for example, they could have a perfect childhood, but they themselves looking at it as trauma, and then they carry this trauma in themselves that then manifests into these behaviors as adults.
Not typically the way it works with narcissists. It does with other types of people you're describing, but with narcissists, what they usually do is deny. They deny any problems in the past. Female narcissists will usually do more of the victim mode, but male narcissists are more likely to say, you know, everything was fine. And then when we dig deeper, we find out it wasn't so fine. They really didn't get the kind of unconditional love that every little child needs. That great demands and burdens were placed on them for being the golden child, the special one, the smart one, the one who was going to make the family proud, you know, do the family's bidding, allow mom to live, you know, through her child this vicarious dream. And so there's a lot of emphasis on performance and being great. And for some, it's being just incredibly spoiled and having, you know, sort of everyone at their beck and call and with no responsibility and no ability to tolerate frustration. So you can see various different trajectories of how narcissism evolves.
Right. Molly, thank you so much for sharing, and John and Kathy, thank you so much for sharing this. I think, okay, so Craig said that they play the victims so well and they carry their own chalk outline. That's funny, actually. Uh, okay, how do we present the truth to our children? Yeah, we'll definitely go into that question very soon. Emmy said, I have an ex that is a narcissist. He wants our child life because my son wants to stay with me and he's using youth protection to stop contact with my son. That's actually reversed to alienation. Am I understanding this correctly, Amy? Do you want to maybe explain a little bit about your story? Kyra said two things can be true at once. They can help someone while abusing someone else. That's actually a good point, right? They can come across really nice and genuine and helpful to someone, yet at the same time,
Oh,
totally
it's
abusive
the
to you.
thing that's very painful for so many partners or ex-partners is that the narcissist can be loved by the community, by their coworkers, by their patients, by people out there in their lives who just see this, you know, this grand effort that they make, their generosity because they can be larger than life in many cases. But then the target at home, unfortunately, ends up being the partner who gets a very different side of the rainbow.
Right, right. So we talk about, how we fell into that traps, what are some of the red flags, the early red flags that people should recognize so
Yeah.
that they don't end up in relationships with these people?
Yeah. I meant to get to that when you asked that earlier. A big red flag is someone who is incredibly self absorbed. Now, we can't always tell immediately because when you're meeting someone, you know, we all talk about ourselves to get to know each other, but the narcissist is different. In a conversation with someone who's not narcissistic, there'll be sort of a give and take, right, of information. And when you're sharing something, someone asks more questions. Oh, you have a son. Tell me about your son. Oh, you seem really excited when you told me that story. You really like, you know, seeing mystery movies. they sort of pay attention and pick up on who you are and what matters to you. The narcissist is more, if they do ask questions, it's like an interviewer. So they're interviewing like an anchor person, I should say. They ask questions without any reflection, without any interpretation, unless it's something that they feel they should judge and teach you a lesson. And then they'll start teaching you in a helpful way. That's how it starts. They will ask questions and not really listen to the answers. Instead, they interrupt and start talking about themselves. Oh, yeah, I know. I had that same experience when I was traveling last week.
And mine is worse, or mine is so much better.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, but I mean, I just skyrocketed through it. It was amazing. And it's as if what you notice in your gut is like you've been erased. You're not even there. You're kind of invisible. And so you start to feel like there's no one else in the room. You feel yourself a little bit glazed over, but you also might feel a little bit intimidated because this is an incredibly interesting and smart person. So maybe it's me. And we start doubting ourselves. I always say when I first started working with narcissists and I made 1,000 mistakes, the thing that I noticed that was so clear is that I could feel myself reduced to when I was a child, saying things that I didn't mean. I was saying yes and agreeing with them, and I didn't agree. I was apologizing. I didn't do anything wrong. I was giving in when I should have been setting a limit. And I noticed myself doing this, and I could feel myself thinking, what am I doing? Right? These are signs when you are going against your own internal advocate, when you are going against your own true will, your own soul, for the sake of this other individual. It's a sign.
Could you mention, could you, like, there's this term about, it's called love bombing. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's kind of like I said before. I mean, they
Yeah.
know what to do to sort of build you up and make you feel like, but you'll hear what you hear with love bombing are a lot of very beautiful adjectives. You're so beautiful. You're so handsome. You're so special. You're so smart. You're so amazing. I don't know how you do it all. It's a lot of sort of building you up in the same ways that they like to imagine themselves being built up by others. It goes over the top. With my clients in the treatment room, they'll say things like, oh, you're just great. I mean, I wouldn't see a therapist who wasn't like really, really good, right? So you have to be good. And I can feel it in the room, and I have to address it, of course. And I do address it when I'm sitting with them because it's a part of they're trying to win your approval. They're trying to win your admiration. They're trying to create a non-see-through effect. So you can't see anything else beyond this just amazingly generous and magnanimous person.
Right. And then you also started to talk about, how you start to doubt yourself when you're dealing with these people. So would you talk about gaslighting?
Yeah, gaslighting is a very serious condition that happens when the narcissist starts twisting reality. Now, it's motivated with narcissists, it's often motivated by their desire for you to not see the truth because the truth might lead to a rejection of them, a judgment of them, an exposure of them, which will create great shame. They have deep toxic shame at the core of them, and they don't want that revealed. So they will do whatever it takes to deny, defend, deflect, and gaslight, distort. Gaslighting is distorting truth. Gaslighting is getting you to doubt yourself and believe what they are suggesting really happened. You didn't say that. You never said that. I think you were having one of those moments where you just forgot. Or, no, I never told you I was going to do X. I don't know where you came up with that. I think maybe you dreamed it. Maybe it was somebody else. That's the gentle version. And then there is the more aggressive, insistent version. You're crazy. I'm telling you, there's something wrong with you. You probably have hormonal issues that are affecting your brain. It's your stupid friends that are always influencing you. You're going to be sorry because one of these days, I'm not going to be here to set the record straight. You're going to be figuring this out by yourself. You can even get threats that are attached to the distortions. And after a while, you've got this narcissistic person who everybody else seems to really like. They're doing really well in their career. So maybe it is me. Maybe I am losing my mind. Maybe I didn't remember it well. maybe I am being too influenced by my friends. And you start doubting your own truth. And if you've already been primed for that, maybe in your own childhood because of early childhood issues that make you feel less secure about yourself, it's easy for the narcissist to get that over on you.
And does it take a lot of repetition for this to work, for you to get into that stage of doubting yourself, or it's just the way that they do it? What is it that make it so effective that victims really start to really lose their sense of reality?
I think it's a few things. I mean, part of it might be the origins of the victim. Like I said, if you already come into your relationship from a childhood where you were made to doubt yourself, maybe by a narcissistic parent yourself, maybe by just someone who is very abusive or neglectful, then you're already somewhat primed to go into that mode where you begin doubting yourself when the narcissist starts twisting the truth. If you've been betrayed in your life, you've been abandoned in your life, you've had rejections, and now you see your narcissistic partner is cheating, and it's crystal clear to you that they've been unfaithful, that they're betraying you, that they're lying to you, but they're trying to tell you you're paranoid. You know, I'm telling you, there's nothing going on. It's just your own insecurities. You might start doubting yourself because it's in some ways it's better to doubt yourself, isn't it? The truth is really horrifying. And so easier for me to want to believe it might be me than to want to believe that my partner is cheating on me. So it's another tempting reason that you can get caught up in the flurry of doubt. And it's repetitious. I mean, they'll just keep doing it. They feel accused all the time and blamed. They've got this bad guy syndrome that they're always trying to run away from. So even when you suggest that you're disappointed about something, I'm disappointed because I thought we were going to talk tonight about the kids and scheduling. I never said that. I never told you we were going to talk about it. You need to get some sleep because you're remembering things wrong. Even then, just a mild disappointment can move them, the narcissist, into places of high sensitivity to being the bad guy, and they retaliate. Or they
So
just close the door in your face.
right. So do they have a target type of people that they target? Because you mentioned about how if you have childhood trauma, or if you was raised in a certain environment, then you are more likely to fall for their, to believe in what they do. So do they sort of, maybe even subconsciously, intentionally looking for a certain type of people to get into a relationship with, or to interact with?
Narcissists find the nicest people. I've met the nicest, most wonderful people that unfortunately have really suffered in relationships with narcissists. Some of them have had childhood trauma, some of them not so much, but they have been affected. And we all have. I mean, the therapeutic approach I use is called Schema Therapy, which means that, we all have life themes. We all have these life themes. Nobody comes from a perfect life. Nobody has a perfect background. We're all made up of our biology and our experiences. And so we all have parts of us that can be affected under certain conditions. And ideally, the narcissist wants someone who's very self sacrificing, right? They want someone who's willing to sacrifice themselves, sell their souls, and subjugate to them, just submit to them, be quiet, do your piece. They also love challenges, but once they win the challenge, then you got to be quiet. They get bored easily with their partners because in many ways, the narcissist, without help, without healing, is like almost a toddler, an adolescent. You're a shiny toy and they get bored with you pretty quickly. They don't usually leave their relationships, however, unless they have someone waiting in the wings. And so you may find that a lot of people will ask me, is it better to have them end the marriage or to have me end the marriage? What's better for us and our children? I don't think there is a better, because it still comes down to them being the bad guy. So even when they end the relationship, they're very bent on still justifying their reasons for leaving so that they won't be judged in a harsh way. If you leave, it's even worse because now they've been dumped and rejected, which is a real ego injury. And they have to justify why, it's really your problem and not theirs, and they're the victim in this situation. So, but going back to your question, the ideal targeted person is um, someone who ultimately is either going to give in or fight with them. They like the fight. They don't mind the fight. The fight is part of their game. It's power struggle. It's who's going to win. It's who comes out on top in the end. The best thing you can do in a relationship like that is stop the dance. Stop dancing, because it's the only way you'll get the narcissist to, sort of lose their balance, is if you stop playing by those same dance steps.
Yeah, I would love to dig more into that because I think that's really this conversation. We really need to talk about how we handle them, right? I want to just kind of go through some of the questions quickly. So Pamela said that she sort of doesn't believe in the childhood trauma stuff because there's a lot of people with horrible childhood that are not, narcissistic. And her ex is narcissistic, but he had a good childhood. Um, I think that's a matter of sort of interpretation, right? Like the way that they look at their own experience and saw that as, you might look at it and think that it's a good childhood, but they themselves did not see it that way, right?
It doesn't matter how we look at it, it's how they experience it, because that's what's going to drive the way they behave. And the
Right.
truth is, many of them have had pretty wounded childhood experiences. So I've treated them for 30 years. I have brought in partners, parents, siblings to verify some of the experiences because they will deny it. They will say their life was good. It's only certain types of narcissists that will use this more, victim role. But even then, there's a reason why they have to do that. There's a disturbance for someone to become this way. It's not just a sport, and it doesn't happen by coincidence. So there is something that was disruptive. I understand not wanting to believe that. I understand that it can be so frustrating because it feels like making excuses. It's not about making excuse. There is no excuse for narcissism. There are only explanations to help us to become more educated, to be wiser, to appreciate, the challenges of human behavior, and to protect ourselves, to set limits, to become more confrontational, to be better advocates for ourselves. I'm a therapist, and even I don't feel sorry for someone in a narcissistic mode. I feel sad for the part of them that may have suffered when they were little, who learned that like the world was supposed to be their place where they could be in charge and tell everybody what to do. I feel bad for the child who got that message because it was a wrong message. I feel badly for the child who maybe temperamentally, maybe the parenting wasn't the problem. Maybe the child's temperament was so impulsive that it wasn't contained well. The limits weren't set. The frustration wasn't taught. There's usually an explanation for how we become who we are, right? We don't just become who we are by magic. There's an explanation, but it's not an excuse. So, to anyone out there listening who thinks, well, she's making excuses for narcissism, that's not my intention. It's to help you to better understand how they become the way they are so you stop blaming yourself. You stop questioning yourself.
So let's talk about how do we deal with them? How, because unfortunately, a lot of our audience here are targeted parents, so they can't just walk away because as a
Right?
child, even though the relationship have ended, they recognize that this person is toxic, and I'm now no longer with this person. But unfortunately, you still have
Yeah.
contacts. So how
Mhm.
do we deal with these people?
Yeah. Well, you set limits, number one. I mean, the most important thing is I know a lot of people are probably no contact with the narcissist except through scheduling. If you are sharing children and you're co-parenting, it might come down to just basic practical communication that you have to share on schedules, or health issues or something else that's more prominent. But I mean, setting limits is really key, knowing how to limit your exposure, um, to never give up your voice, though. So even when you limit your exposure and you limit your time, that you make sure that you're speaking from a voice that is telling the truth based on what you need, that's really representing you in an honest way, even if it means having to filter out certain things or craft your language in a way that the narcissist can hear it. And what I mean by that is there's a really beautiful and powerful strategy that I teach people called empathic confrontation, which means that you take everything you know. That's empathy. Empathy is not sympathy. So it's not about feeling sorry. Empathy is taking all the wisdom that you have about this person, everything you know about them, their sensitivity to criticism, their quick, jump into victimization, their blaming style, their arrogance, their competitiveness. And you start with that. You start with, I know this is going to sound like a criticism. I know this might feel like I'm trying to control again. God knows I don't believe I can control. That's not my intention. That's not my goal. We're parents and we need to come to a conclusion about X. So how do you want to handle this? Your input is as important as my input. We have to do this together. Now, some of you may be going, oh my God, I could never talk that way to the narcissist in my life. He would just, or she would just scream or hang up the phone. Might be true, but you can always pick up your phone, find a little recording app and just record it and send it. And it's your voice. It doesn't get misinterpreted like an email or a text message does. It's your voice. It's clear. It's firm. It's articulate. And you send it off. Unless you've been told by your lawyer not to do so, it's a very effective way because they can listen to it on their own time and they can't interrupt you. And they can't hang up on you. So you can say what's necessary. And if you start with empathy, even though they may not always deserve things like, look, I want us to be able to parent effectively. Our child is the one who's going to suffer. You don't want that. I don't want that. We've got to find a way to get through this process, right? When you start with that, you're giving them some benefit of the doubt. They probably don't deserve that. But in the interest of your child, as I said before, we craft our language in such a way that represents your truth and may get their attention while getting rid of distractions.
So one of the problems that alienated parents face is that they have to deal with a lot of false allegations.
Yes.
So the alienators will sometimes directly to the targeted parents, constantly telling them, you're bad parents, you're horrible, you know, sort of that kind of attack. But sometimes it's through other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they almost just refuse to have a conversation with you. They would hold the children, and then they will send this sort of constant attack every time you wanted to address anything. And then these parents don't even have access to the children because these alienators, they, in the name of protecting the children, because they think that they are superior, they are the better parents, they somehow have the right to make the judgment on the other parent and saying, you're bad, and then they get to shut the targeted parents down while blaming them as being bad parents, and they don't give up on that. So how do we respond to these alienators?
Yeah, it's pretty tough. I mean, it's horrifying actually, and I know many of you, probably most of you, that's why you're part of this group, are dealing with situations like you just described, Petra. And I'm so sorry for that because I think without legal support, without court interventions, without some kind of evaluators to really come in and be your advocates, and I know many of you have probably gone that route and you get no relief because I've heard this from my own clients who are dealing with these issues and they're really struggling because they're not getting relief from the courts, their lawyers, they're not getting relief. Some of them have gone to like mediators and evaluators that courts will respect and listen to. So it's another way to get communication clarity and to get fairness on these issues with the children. But those children, caught in the middle of this and the suffering that you deal with, not having access to your child, is just such a tremendous burden to carry. And I think you have to really engage in as much self-care as you can through these periods while you're working with lawyers and courts and evaluators, while you're doing your best effort to try to reach the alienator, you know, I think it's always worth, you got to take a deep breath and really stir to yourself at the core, but it's always worth a little effort or energy to just put your 2 cents in. And it means a little bit of a gag reflex, right? Because it's kind of sickening to sort of have to do some of the things we do on behalf of our kids and for their welfare. But it might mean, saying something to the alienator like, um, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to dance this dance anymore. Can we come to some kind of a conclusion that will best protect our children? I know that's what you want. Gag, right? I know that's what you want. I know you want to be a good parent. I think you know deep in your soul that I do too. And we got to find a way for our child before it's too late and they suffer the consequences of this conflict. So you make it a we thing. It's not you're the problem, I'm the problem. It's a we have a problem. With some alienators, narcissistic types, it might work. It has worked for some of my clients. It doesn't work for most. So I'm not making a big promise because you know how hard this is. But I think that at the end of the day, we have to care for ourselves. And when you do have access to your children, you have to really care and act on their behalf. There's things you can do to educate your children about narcissism, about what's happening on the other side with their parent.
How do we talk to our children? If we do have some access and we can see that the children are being influenced, how do we talk to our children?
You talk in parts talk. So you can, they remember they're being gaslit too.
Yes.
So they are victims of gaslighting when they're with an alienating parent. And here's the difference when it becomes a narcissistic alienating parent. If the narcissistic, they feel entitled to it. So you've got this big issue of entitlement. They feel entitled to do this. There's other types of alienators, but the narcissistic types feel very entitled and they're very tough. And they're lonely. These are narcissists are lonely people. They're also very lonely at the core. So part of the motive is to keep the children with them because they don't have anyone else intimately in their life. When you're with your children, you talk about very gently, because remember, they have been a bit brainwashed now. So let's say it's their dad. You can say, I know there's parts of your dad that you really love. He can be very funny parts of him and, parts of him that can be very generous and parts of him that can be kind of magical at times, And I know there's parts of him that can sometimes make you feel confused and maybe feel other things, some parts of him that might be harder for you. Do you want to talk about those parts? Maybe I can help you. Do you have questions for me? Ask your child if they have questions for you. Ask them about the confusing parts of themselves, right? When we break things down into parts, what you're doing is giving permission for them to love their alienating parent, but you're giving them permission to still love that parent who they've now become somewhat, super connected to in a pathological way. But you're giving them permission to still love parts of that parent. And you're giving them permission to be angry, upset, confused, even hurt by other parts. It allows some freedom of expression, some freedom to talk to you, to ask questions. Well, dad says that, you're going to take me away and you're going to run away with me and he's never going to see me again. Oh, honey, that must be so frightening to hear that. Oh, that's a part of your dad that must be very confused. And I think a part of him that gets very hurt. But you got to know that that would never happen. Because I know you need your dad just as much as you need me, right? You need us both. So that would never happen. What other questions do you have? I'm so glad that you were able to tell me that, right? A lot of encouragement, a lot of praise for the child's courage, a lot of, again, dissecting it into small bits so that they have freedom to express.
And do we address the narcissistic behaviors especially to children or to people around you? For example, alienated parents will have to deal with lawyers and have to deal with their therapists and things like that. Do how do we alert them of these behaviors without using the label? Because sometimes people don't like us using that label to describe, they, if you just say, oh, my ex is narcissistic, usually people actually have an opinion about you, right? So how do we
Yes.
bring alert to these people that are, we need them to be on our team, but without using that label?
Well, I think that once you're pretty sure about your diagnostic assessment, you make sure you find a therapist who is an expert in narcissism, and you make sure you find a lawyer who has some savvy, some experience dealing with narcissistic opponents. And it is your right to request that. When you are a consumer of service, you're spending a lot of money and time and, your blood, sweat, and tears on this. It is your right as a consumer to make sure your therapist is well trained in these issues. Trust your gut. You may not have it completely right, but it's okay. You're probably pretty on target. So trust your instincts. Look for therapists and lawyers who understand these issues and will be supportive. And they will go looking, investigating, and digging to see if they find something different, so be it. But you don't have to apologize for something that you're experiencing.
So what about a lot of targeted parents started to notice that some of their children may actually get influenced by the narcissistic parent, and they themselves starting to pick up on this behavior and starting to become narcissistic themselves? Like, how do we prevent our children from developing into this?
Yeah, that's true. And because there is a lot to be said for imitation, and children are very intuitive, they can sense things. I think a child who's sharing time with a narcissistic parent who also happens to be alienating or attempting to alienate the child from the other parent, children will sense this mission. But what they also feel deep inside is that strong need for attachment to that parent, no matter what. Even though when they don't want to be there, they don't want to go to the parent, they'll even say, please don't make me go. But there is still this need and this attachment to that parent at some level. And because it's so fragile, that attachment, because it comes with conditions, and the conditions are, I can have all the fun I want with dad and everything, all the goodies I want, and dad's approval, and dad doesn't get angry, and everything's really fine as long as I agree with him, as long as I give in to him, as long as I act like him, even if I behave like him. So when they go home to the non-narcissistic parent, all the rage comes out, or the quiet, close the door, hiding comes out, or the mimicking of the behavior with the narcissistic parent starts to come out. And the only thing you can really do, not the only thing, I mean, there's several things you can do. One is to help your child to get help if it's something that you can do unilaterally, because you probably won't get the support of the narcissistic parent, but try to get some professional help. Get some professional help for yourself to coach you on how to help your child with this. Some ways are just being the best version of a parent that you can be, because your child is going to be inheriting aspects of your modeling, of your interventions, of your ways of being, because they need it. Because we all need it when we were young. We need to be able to learn how to tolerate frustration. We need discipline. We need unconditional love. We need to be able to promote self-expression and give them away. We need to be able to say to them, that's so not like you when you speak to me like that. That's so different. It feels different. And I'm wondering if that's a way like you and your dad might bond. I can appreciate, or you and your mom, if it's the mom, might bond together. Maybe makes you feel closer to dad. And I get that. That would be, hard not to do when you're in his presence. But, it can also, for some people, I'm your mom, so I love you no matter what, even though I may not like that behavior so much, but I'm more concerned about how it would affect other people. So you can even role play with your child, let them be on the receiving end of that experience. get a sense of what it feels like to be bullied, what it feels like to be demeaned if they're doing that, to be
That's
demanding.
Yeah, that's such a great suggestion actually. So what about situation where there are parents that we know that have lost contact with their children, so because the alienators have brainwashed the children to the point that the children turn and reject them, so the children now have no contact, and now they are adult, so it's beyond the control of the court system.
Yes.
And they feel like it's too late. They feel like it's, I mean, I think some of the question in the chat room, I forgot who that was that I saw. But really, I think that there are still, even though you don't see the reaction back from the children, because the parent can still sometimes continue to text them or email, but there's no response.
Mhm.
Do you have advice for them on how do they now reach out to these adult children that don't respond? But really, sometimes they still do read those text messages. So, what is the most effective way for us to reach out to our children who have been under influence of the narcissistic parents?
Mhm. I think it is exactly that, Petra. I think you have to continue to just keep the communication going. I really love audio messages. So I think that when you use your voice, you have the ability to really manage the flex, the bend, the tone, the rhythm, the pace, where you want to put the emphasis. You can take your recording device. It's so easy. In 2 minutes, you can say a lot. And in 2 minutes is a little file, so you can just send it as a text message, but they can listen to you saying, not, you don't want to say things that are going to create guilt, right? Because that they're not going to listen to that. And that's going to feel like, oh, my alienating parent is correct, right? The narcissistic parent was right. You want to say things just like, I think of you often. I hope that you're well. The door is always open. My heart is always open to you. You're important to me. Despite anything else that you've heard or known, you still matter, and I'm here for you if you need me. You still make it about you being there as that, wonderful soft landing, you being there as that embracing, loving parent that's there for them when they're ready to return. Many will return, and some will return sort of tentatively just to kind of catch a little glimpse. And it may take time, it may take years. Um, they figure it out ultimately. And especially if the other parent is narcissistic, because it's just a matter of time before the narcissistic parent, just like they did with you, they lose interest in the children. When there's no more narcissistic supply, the children become just an inconvenience.
What is that narcissistic supply?
The ego that makes them feel special and big and good. There's no mission anymore. There's no one to punish. There's no great motivation. Maybe they found a new person that they're now involved with. Maybe they have a new family that they're now involved with. So their children are not as necessary for their ego as they
Right.
once were.
Right. Thank you so much. Parents, if you are not already on our mailing list, please subscribe. We do have to end today a little bit earlier. So anyway, but I appreciate so much, Wendy. Is there any last, advice or thoughts for parents before we go?
I would just say, take good care of yourselves. It is so critical that you maintain your sturdiness, that because this is so incredibly hard, and you always want to lead with your healthy best self, your wise self, coming to things like this and educating yourself. Go to my website. There's a lot of resources there. There's an online co-parenting with the narcissist community that you can take a look at, which is run by Susan Stiffelman and me on a monthly basis. There's lots to see and to learn, and the more you understand, the more it makes sense to you, the freer you become inside, the clearer your mind becomes, the more able you are to withstand some of this pain that you're suffering, and to really think and craft, cleverly, new skills for being able to try to make a difference. But take good care of yourselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, parents. Please help sharing this. And we'll have a lot more events in the next week. So please subscribe and we'll let you know. Thank you so much.